Hey guys, Ryan here with Midwest Outdoor Experience. As most of you have noticed, the outside temperatures are starting to warm up, which means that the water temps at the lake are also going to be warming up quite a bit. This means that the bass are going to be moving from their winter staging areas out on the main lake points, bluff ends, and the deeper water structure, and moving back into the pockets to start staging for the pre-spawn and getting ready for the spawning period. And today I'm here to talk to you a little bit about one of my favorite baits to throw during the pre-spawn, and that is the spinnerbait. So let's get right into it. So if you're going to be throwing the spinnerbait, the first question you'll probably ask yourself is, which color should I throw? I tend to categorize my spinnerbaits into three main color categories. That is the bluegill colors, the natural or shad colors, and the dirty watercolors. Which color I decide to throw is obviously based on the fishing conditions. So if it's really muddy, murky water, I'm going to pick one of these dirty watercolors, which usually entail very chartreuse or bold white colors. Any other time, I like to try and imitate the main forage of the area. So at Table Rock and Lake the Ozarks, the main forage is usually shad. So I'll mostly throw these shad colors. Now, if we do move around docks, I will sometimes switch to a bluegill color and see if that gives me a little bit better luck than throwing the shad color. If you're on a farm pond, bluegill color is probably your better bet, or these dirty water ones, but the shad colors do work in farm ponds. I've definitely fired up some schools to fish plenty of times using a shad color spinnerbait at a farm pond. So in that case, I don't think it really matters too much. The next thing you will consider is which blade type to throw. So there are essentially two main types of spinnerbait blades. The first one is the willow leaf, which is identified by its very long, skinny, slender profile and has the pointy tip. The next blade is the Colorado blade, which is identified by its very round, bullet shape. And the differences between these blades are, it affects how much thump and vibration it gives to your bait. So the willow leaf is going to give you less thump and vibration to your bait, and you tend to fish it a little bit faster. Whereas the Colorado blade is going to give you a lot more thump and vibration to your bait, but you typically fish it a little bit slower. Now those are the two blades on one spectrum, on both ends of the spectrum versus the thump and vibration. But there is one actually that's in the middle, and that is called the Indiana blade. So the Indiana blade is just a happy medium between the Colorado and willow leaf blades. And to identify this between a Colorado blade, you can take a look at them and you can see the Indiana blade on the left. It does have that round shape profile to it, but it's a little bit more slender and not quite as circular as the Colorado blade. Now there are a ton of specialty blades that do fall in between that spectrum, and most of them are pretty on par with the Indiana blade, but there are some that are very, very similar to the willow, or on the opposite end, very, very similar to the Colorado. The next question will be, which blade color should I throw? So when it comes to blade color, in dirty water, if it's like really, really dirty, I do like to go with this chartreuse or white blade colors. It's just much more bold and makes it easier for the fish to see. Whenever the water's that dirty, the flash that these gold or silver blades just doesn't really penetrate that much. So one thing that's really gained some attention over the last couple of years, I mean, this has been around for a long time, but it seems to have gotten bigger recently, is this red blade. And a lot of people seem to associate the red kicker blade with kind of the red pre-spawn color that bass seem to trigger off of, which is kind of based off of the what I call the red crawfish theory. I don't particularly know if that's true with these red kicker blades. If you notice, they are obviously on these dirty watercolors, and I don't really see them too often on the natural color baits. So in my opinion, that's just something very bright and useful for the key to fish on in dirty watercolors. But this is my first year with red kicker blade, so I'm going to give it a shot and see what happens. If it's not dirty water, I tend to choose a blade color that matches the profile of the spinnerbait that I'm throwing. So for example, shad have a very silver, bright type flash. So on these shad colored baits, I tend to use the silver blade because the flash that it creates really matches the profile of the bait. And then as you can kind of see with the bluegill, a bluegill's flash is a little bit more darker or gold color, so that just matches this profile. Now there are some baits that do have both, and I think that's just to give it a little bit different look. But what you will usually notice is the main blade on the bait does match the color profile of the bait. So this is a bluegill, has a gold main blade with a silver tandem, and vice versa for this one. It's a shad color profile with a main silver blade and a gold tandem blade. So when you are choosing blades, if you're choosing the same type of blade, one thing to consider is the blade size. So you're probably wondering, what does the blade size affect? Well, the really obvious one is how much thump it gives to the bait. This larger number 5 willow leaf on the left is going to give a lot more thump than this smaller number 2 or 3 willow leaf on the right. But there is also one other thing that it greatly affects, and that is the lift on the bait. So what I mean by that is, with these larger blades, let me clear some of these out of the way. A larger blade is going to give your bait more lift the faster you fish it. So what that means is, the faster that you reel it, the higher in the water column it's going to rise. Whereas this smaller blade is not going to give the bait as much lift. So you can tend to fish this smaller one faster and keep it a little bit lower in the water compared to this larger number 5 blade. And that also goes the other way. If you're trying to burn the bait at the top of the water column, this smaller blade allows you to burn it faster and not have those blades coming out of the water and losing their action versus these larger blades. So you'll eventually reel too fast and this is going to come out of the water, and you'll be able to reel this one faster and still keep the blades in the water. So with these blade size differences, it's not always feasible to have a bunch of different spinnerbaits themselves. So an easy way to switch out these main blades on a bait is just to go buy replacement blades. You can get them from Tackle Warehouse or any lure making website. Tackle Warehouse tends to send them in a little bit smaller packages, like not so many at a time, maybe 6 or 10. But that allows you to switch out these blades for larger or smaller ones and alter the profile and vibration of your bait without having to actually go out and buy a bunch of different spinner baits. And if you're going to do that, I definitely highly recommend getting a very good pair of split ring pliers. These are the Xuron split ring pliers. By far the best ones I've ever used, hands down. Now when it comes to trailers on spinner baits, I do have one here that has a trailer hook, but I tend to not use a trailer hook. And that is because a spinnerbait by nature is extremely weedless. Adding this trailer on here, you are just killing its weedless capabilities. And as if most of you may know, a big way to fish this is, really kind of get it up in that brush and maybe get it stuck a little bit and shake it loose. Once you shake it loose, that bass is going to eat it. So the trailer I like to go with usually is just a Kitech swim bait. And just thread that on here. And there you go. And now what this trailer can do sometimes, especially if you use a little bit larger profile, if the fish are really swiping at the blades and missing your bait, adding this swim bait gives it a little bit more bulk and will hopefully bring in the fish's attention to that bait. And I'll throw on a 4-3 to give a little bit better example of that. So adding this 4-3 Kitech, you can see how much more bulk that gives to this bait versus not having any trailer at all. So if it's really hitting the blades and swiping at your bait and missing it, then adding that trailer is a good help. So there is one other thing that is actually somewhat common with some spinnerbaits. If you do notice that fish are missing your bait a lot and swiping at the blade, as you can see on this spinnerbait, look how far back this blade is from the hook. So if fish are going to be swiping at this blade, there's probably a 100% chance they are going to completely miss biting your bait. Whereas with some of these smaller 3/8 ounce baits, it's not as much of a problem. As you can see, the blade itself is in pretty good line with the hook itself. So if you do have one that sits really far back like this and they're missing a lot, either add the trailer or a trailer hook or a trailer to the bait, and that should help you land some more fish into your boat. So about how to fish the spinnerbait. Well, in reality, this thing can be fished so many different ways, it is unreal. What I tend to like to do is give it a constant reel at the desired depth, and I do what is called either a reel pop or a rod pop. So the reel pop is I just give it a quick half crank and stop and just let that bait, the skirt flutter and then the blades flutter a little bit, and I just let it fall for a second and I continue reeling. I also do the same thing with a rod pop, where I'll just reel and just pop, pop, and then maybe let it sit for a second and then continue reeling again. As far as where I like to fish this, honestly, you can really throw it anywhere, but if you can find cover like rocks or brush and you have live scope and you can really target it, that is a great way to work this bait. So as many of you have probably figured out in the past, if you really get this to tick the tops of the brush piles or something, or get it stuck in there, and then once you get it free, that's when you'll get that bite. And then kind of what I was talking about with the rod or reel pop, whenever I do get to the brush pile or structure that I'm fishing, I do like to give this bait that rod or reel pop, just to give the surprised bait fish spooking action. That's what I like to call it. That will hopefully trigger that bass into committing to the bait so you can get him into your boat. All right, that is all that I have for you. Just a quick video on spinnerbaits. Hopefully you learned something new or found this video helpful. I wish you guys all good luck with your pre-spawn fishing. Hopefully some of you guys can get some big ones. If you have any big ones and you'd like to share it, post it on our Facebook page, and we would love to see the catches that you get out there. We really appreciate all of you guys for subscribing and tuning in, and we will see you next time.